No sweat. Washington took care of business against Purdue.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thanks for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network. And just a quick reminder to all you radios out there, wherever you get this podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, wherever that might be, make sure to click that subscribe button, click that little bell as well, so you never miss when we post a new show or go live just like this. And if you're on the audio only side of things, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, as it does help the show out a lot. Now, I just got back from Husky Stadium a couple minutes ago, so it's time to some true instant reactions for me here from Washington's 49-13 win over Purdue. I want to talk about the defense a little bit later on, because they were certainly playing an inspired game. Jedd Fisch mentioned that very briefly during his press conference. We'll get there in a little while. I want to talk about the short-handed offense, how it showed a lot of promise for the future. And when I look at just the overall view of this game, that is the #1 thing that stood out to me. My good buddy Alex Katzen, who writes with us over at Huskies Wire, pointed out something tremendous, where if you want to include Zaydrius Rainey-Sale and his interception, 10 of the 12 players that touched the ball for Washington tonight all have eligibility for next season. The two that don't, wide receiver Omari Evans, who put together a really nice performance that I want to talk about, and quarterback Kai Horton. So outside of that, this is a performance that Washington absolutely has the ability to build on. You look at Denzel Boston being unable to suit up. Jedd Fisch talked about it during his post-game press conference, saying that there was a plan to get Jonah Coleman involved. And he said during one of the reps of 7-on-7 during pregame warmups that the running back was unable to decelerate after making a reception, and they just felt that it was going to be better to hold him out at that point in time. So we saw a lot of work fall to Adam Mohammed, Jordan Washington tonight. They put together 160-something yards and 4 total touchdowns between the two of them. That was a truly phenomenal performance, and it gets me so excited to just think about what the future of this offense is going to be, because another thing that Jedd mentioned that I was really intrigued by, and something that really did stand out, is for the majority of the season, when we've seen opposing defenses, and we've talked to players on the offense after the game, they've talked about, we have had to try to find a way to scheme around the fact that everybody's plan of attack defensively has been to stop Jonah Coleman. Obviously, without Jonah tonight, that plan was very different from the Purdue Boilermakers, because their plan, according to Jedd Fisch, was they were selling out to stop Dezmen Williams in the run game, and that certainly showed. He had 7 total carries in the game for 23 yards, so he was not a super impactful force on the ground. But when you dive into these numbers, Washington put together 212 rushing yards as a team. 108 of them came on 5 attempts from Jordan Washington. Yes, it does help when you have Washington's longest touchdown play of the year, 68-yard run on his second or third touch, I believe it was. And that certainly helps a lot. But Adam Mohammed puts together 59 yards, 3 touchdowns on 17 carries. The 3.5 yards per carry is not necessarily the biggest thing in the world here. But I look at just this performance behind a patchwork offensive line, where you have a backup left guard in Paki Finau, a backup center in Zach Henning, and John Mills playing his first college game at right tackle. There's a whole lot of just new going on along the offensive line there. And I think that Adam Mohammed is somebody who, the more we see him, the better it's going to look. He was breaking tackles tonight. He was doing a whole lot of good things on that big time screenplay as well. He's someone who I'm really excited to watch just continue to build up as his career goes along. And tonight showed why he has the ability to be a big time bell cow back, but Washington probably doesn't need him to at any point in his career, which is an exciting thought because of Jordan Washington. Jedd Fisch kind of alluded to, obviously without saying his name, 4-star running back Brian Bonner, who's going to be coming in hopefully in January in time for spring practice and everything. Washington is going to have a really nice stable of running backs to work with. And when you combine that with Dezmen Williams and what he brings to the table, there's so many exciting things to think about with what Washington can do on the ground. And then you couple that with what you saw through the air today. A good note before we even get into that on freshman wide receiver Raiden Vinesbright, who went down early in the game and had to be put in an ambulance, be taken off the field. Jedd Fisch did say after the game that he was able to move all his extremities. He was alert, he was aware, he was awake, and it sounds like it was more precautionary than anything else, which is a very good sign. So hopefully we hear more about that from Jedd on Monday, but it sounds like everything is going well on that front. So I look at Washington's passing game outside of Raiden because he's absolutely going to be a very big part of this passing attack moving forward. We saw Audric Harris get involved tonight. Jedd Fisch shared that I think it's probably a good idea after what went on with his situation last year that Audric Harris has chosen to redshirt this season. I think it was a mutual decision between him and the coaching staff, and that this was the fourth game that he played in this year, especially after playing him in 7, 8, 9 games last year and just not giving him a whole ton of run, giving him a year to really just kind of take a back seat and get a little more adjusted to the college level after throwing him into the fire last year was a good idea. And so you look at his numbers tonight. He puts together 2 catches for 90 yards and a touchdown. Washington's longest passing play of the year is included in that, a 61-yard score. We saw just so many different guys get involved. Decker DeGraaf had a tremendous day. 5 catches for a career high 91 yards. Omari Evans gets involved. 3 catches for 60 yards. There are so many good things that you can look at from this passing attack as a whole. And I think the one that stood out to me the most, outside of the usage of Audric Harris with just more guys having to get involved in the offense with no Denzel Boston tonight, was the usage of Decker DeGraaf. And early on, it was a little bit frustrating where you call the drag route on that first drive of the game. And I was not happy with that play calling. It's one of those things where you can, especially against this Purdue defense, where they came into this game giving up over 240 yards per game through the air. This was one of those games where why not try to push the ball downfield early on? But it looked like the offensive line was still starting to get settled. And seeing Decker just kind of break out the way he did tonight with a couple of big time chunk plays. I think he had 2 30-yard catches in this game. That was something that's been really exciting to see because he's had a little bit of an up and down season. There've been a couple of drops in key spots. I think back to the one against Illinois. He had one against Wisconsin last week as well. Seeing more and more from Decker is a really exciting thought because he can be such a versatile weapon for this offense, especially when you have another blocking tight end in there like Quentin Moore, who can just stay around the line of scrimmage and do the dirty work so Decker can be freed up on different sorts of routes, which is where we saw him have the most success last season. Being able to just see a little bit more of that tonight and just everything that this offense can do with somebody like Omari Evans stretching the field, with Dezmen Roebuck, who's able to operate underneath. He had just 3 catches today for 10 yards and a touchdown, but I love everything that I saw from him. And it's just such an exciting thought to think about what all of those guys can do, plus what you have coming down the pipeline. I'll talk a little bit more about the recruiting stuff on Monday because Washington had some big time visitors on campus over the weekend, including a top 100 overall prospect in the 2026 class that happens to play wide receiver. So there's a lot going on at that position right now. And you see what you've already gotten from Dezmen Roebuck, what you've already gotten from Chris Lawson and Raiden Weisbreit this year. Decker DeGraaf, who's a freshman All-American last year, really starting to finally pick up where he left off after an up and down start to his season as his role had been a little bit different in previous weeks. There's so much that I look about in this contest that I just think is so sustainable. And I look at somebody like John Mills, who is definitely going to kick out to tackle in the long term. Seeing him stick out there, I was so happy with not only his performance today, but the decision to put him out there because it just bodes so well for his future to see how he performed against a solid Purdue pass rush. And just knowing that his long-term just plan is going to be a tackle is really reassuring. Seeing some more from Champ Taulealea, looking at what Paki Finau is able to do. There's so much to like about this offensive line performance. And it really just kind of lends a hand to one of the bigger things for me is that this short-handed Husky team, there is so much to like about their potential moving forward. But we'll get to that right after a message from our good friends over at DoorDash. It's almost the weekend. Time to look back, crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order, these players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it down. For Washington, Demond Williams Jr. delivered in a big way. 84% completion percentage, 257 yards, a pair of touchdowns. When the pressure was on, he came through, no hesitation, no delay. And if you've been watching week after week, this performance wasn't a fluke. Dezmen is on a streak. And just like Dezmen delivered for the Huskies, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash streaks, you save every Saturday you order, stack it up all season, and you can save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday, keep the streak alive, fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply, promo period through November 8th. We've also got a message from our good friends over at Dewar. If you notice this snazzy shirt I'm wearing, that was provided by our good friends over at Dewar, as well as the jeans that I was able to wear to today's game. They were by far, I've worn them once, the most comfortable jeans that I have ever worn in my life. And part of that is because Dewar jeans have 5 times the stretch of traditional denim, and the fact that they're antibacterial means your jeans stay fresher longer, so you can wear them more and wash less. And made with Cool Max that regulates your body temperature and wicks moisture, they keep you cool and comfortable as temperatures change. Which this shirt, these jeans, I can absolutely confirm that they felt incredible. Dewar combines classic jeanswear style with the kind of comfort and performance you get from athletic wear. It really is the best of both worlds. Designed to look great and stay comfortable all day, no matter what you're doing. Simply put, Dewar makes the world's most comfortable pants without having to sacrifice style. Trust me, once you try these, they'll be your go-to. Get a pair for yourself or as an amazing holiday gift. Go now to shopdewar.com/LockedOnSeattle. You'll get 15% off your first order. That's shopdewar.com/LockedOnSeattle for 15% off. One more time, shopdewar.com/LockedOnSeattle. And we are now joined by our good buddy, Lars Hanson. Lars, I was so pleased with what I saw from this offensive line tonight. It was a little ugly early. Zach Henning had a couple of snaps go awry, but as this young group really settled in, we see Paki Finau get a start at left guard. We see John Mills get a start at right tackle. I was so pleased with what the plan seems to be for this group, and seeing Champ Taulealea just kind of go drive for drive at a certain point, it felt like, with Landen Hatchett, was so refreshing, because it's something we talked about with Jedd Fisch and Jimmy Doherty earlier on in the week. Is Champ very clearly seems to be such a big part of the future plans for this unit. And Jedd Fisch said as much after the game, and then just kind of looking at not only his performance, but the line as a whole, just the run blocking seemed to just really kick up a notch when he was in the game.
It did, and it was honestly kind of refreshing to see, because we thought coming into the season that Champ would be a guy that could potentially beat out Guerin by week 7 or 8. When you talked about the projection of what we expected from this offensive line. But given that he'd only played one game prior to today, it was almost a sense of, look, we know what we have in Champ. We just wanted to get into the weight room, get his body right, get everything good to go, so that the next time he comes on the field, we don't have a question about him. And that's kind of what we saw from him today, where whether it was run blocking or pass blocking, everything seemed to be clicking for Washington on offense. I mean, the amount of times you could just looking down on the field, and it was open hole left, open hole right, open hole, really anywhere you wanted to go with it. It's why Dezmen was able, I think he only had 3 incompletions on the day. Like, for me, Champ is a guy that next season you don't want to peg him as a starter already, but when we talk about what might they have to do with the offensive line going into next season during the offseason, you get almost pretty much pen him in at this point as a starter. Just depends on where you want to put him.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things where we talked about it on the show earlier this week as well, where you look at this group, and now that, he's got 2 games under his belt, you can play him in each of these next 3 games if you want to. I'm curious to see what the plan might be against Oregon, but it's one of those games where you just kind of take a step back and you look at the bigger picture. It's a perfect time to get him into the game. And it's one of the things that also at the same point makes that Wisconsin loss last week so frustrating, is even shorthanded. Yeah, this team, certainly has just 2 different iterations of itself. There's a home version and a road version. So we'll see which one decides to show up next week against UCLA. But I look at this team, and I look at just what Jedd Fisch is building, and you got to see a lot of it tonight. He talked a lot about his plan in his post-game press conference with us, and just said, yeah, we're on the right path. We're starting to look more like a Big Ten team. We're starting to get those bodies in the door. And that's why we want to talk about the offensive line right here, is because you could really see those things just starting to shine through with the way the run blocking worked. You were able to rush for 212 yards, and that's, before taking out the bad snap that led to a fumble on the second drive of the game. I want to say it was, or might have been the first. There's been a lot that's happened tonight. And then the kneel downs at the end of the game too. So in actuality, you rushed for a lot closer to 230 yards. And it's just one of those things where you need to be able to do that in a game like this. And it's nice to see you do that against a bad team after you weren't able to do so against a bad team with a good defensive line, admittedly so, last week. But it's one of those things, again, where the bigger picture just shows everything is moving in the right direction. And it doesn't mean that you're not allowed to be extremely frustrated by the way that this team looked last week. It's not that you're not allowed to, look at some of these things and say things like, man, why can't you do this more on the road? And I still have my reservations about what this team might look like moving forward. I think all those things are fair, but I think that a lot of this can also, while it is still absolutely chalked up to coaching at the end of the day, can just be taken as, okay, this is still a young team and there is still a very long way to go here.
And I'm glad you talked about in the past, it is a young team where we got to see a lot of those young pieces today. I mean, I don't know where exactly the number came from, but Jedd did point out during his post-game press conference that Washington's freshmen having 2,000 snaps or 2,000
that
whatever
does
you
make sense.
And it absolutely does. And tonight was kind of an example of that, where, kind of segueing the two together with John Mills playing at right tackle, another guy that does not look like a freshman, has not played like a freshman this year, and a guy last year in Adam Mohammed who got all 13 games, I believe it was, at running back, behind Cam Davis and Jonah Coleman, for a night like tonight, where he's able to be the starter in a game where, when did he find out? Who's to say? Adam said one thing, Jedd said it was a game time decision. We're going to leave it at what Jedd said. It's a game time decision. And for me, it's a case of no matter who ends up being plugged into that situation, what we expected from Jordan Washington last season, we saw tonight. What we expected from Adam Mohammed next season, we also got a glimpse of tonight. And I think when you have such a young nucleus and a young core, being able to build that together, yeah, you're going to have some growing pains. You're going to have the Wisconsin games. You're going to have, even as dominant as it was, kind of going back to that Northwestern game last year, it wasn't like a 42-10 game. It was 17-5, 22-5, whatever. 24-5. Yeah, it's like that wasn't a blowout, but it wasn't, anywhere close. And I think tonight was kind of a cataclysm of both of those games combined, where you're looking at it saying you finally got the offensive explosion, but you did so with all of the young pieces, Decker DeGraaf having a career night as well. All of those things building into, they still haven't hit their peak yet. Adam still hasn't had a 100-yard game. I thought he was going to tonight after the first half, and then I think he only had like 9 yards.
I think they were just like, yeah, we don't really need him.
And I think, honestly, it's a credit to Jedd and the staff. And it's a credit to the staff, because what we saw against Washington State, where Jonah gets those extra carries to get over 100 yards, Denzel gets the 100-yard, like all those types of things. Jedd didn't risk it in a game like tonight, which was, I do want to kind of side note here, seeing Carver Willis in the game late in the fourth quarter with Kai Horn at quarterback was a little surprising, but it was good to have all those guys still playing together.
It wasn't just him, though. It was the majority of the starting offensive line, which might have been just more of a reps thing, because it felt like, not necessarily from post-game comments where Jedd didn't necessarily talk about Drew Azzopardi, but just from the way it sounded throughout the week, that they want to get this particular offensive line unit some more reps together for this coming week at UCLA. That was more my read on the situation, because you look at the tackles in particular, you have Sawane Fasolo, and then kind of behind there, it's a bunch of guys who don't necessarily have any experience yet. If you want to throw Jack Schaefer in that boat, Justin Hilkema, whoever else you might want to just add into that discussion. I think that was more the reason for the offensive line in general. But I also I want to talk about this wide receiver group for a minute before we move on, because I thought we were going to see more Chris Lawson tonight than we did. And I was a little shocked that we didn't, but at the same point, it was awesome to see Omari Evans step up, because this is something that, you in particular have been waiting on for a while, and to see Washington just want to get him involved so early. And, after a couple of really ugly, just first couple of drives to the game, to see Omari step up in such a big way and make that big, I think it was a 43-yard catch to get Washington in the red zone, and then just really spark the offense. And they didn't look back from that point on, which was awesome. It's exactly what we've been waiting for from him. And I don't know if, it's something that maybe if Raiden does have to miss some time moving forward, that we'll see a little bit even more of him if Denzel is able to maybe return for this game against UCLA. But no matter the case, this was I don't want to say it was the piece that Washington's offense was missing, because it was very clear that it was still able to succeed without him, but he just adds an extra really, really exciting element to it.
It's why you brought him in, for that security depth. You don't rely on him to be the 1A or 1B even, but just a guy that almost like what Dezmen Roebuck has grown into throughout this season, where a dependable target, a guy who knows how to get open, knows how to give you production. And again, it was 3 catches for 60 yards that Amari had. It doesn't wow you. It's not like, 10 for 240, but you don't need him to do that. That's not what you brought him in to do. You just brought him in to bring the younger guys along while offering a security blanket. And that's kind of the bridge that he created tonight.
No, that's absolutely what it was. And, you combine that with what we saw from Audric Harris, which we've been I know this coaching staff too, has been hoping to see for a while, where Dezmen Roebuck, one of my bold predictions was that we were going to see him set a career high in catches with 5+. He only got to 3 for 10 yards and a touchdown, but it was something else that just Jedd Fisch went back and touched on after the game. Is we only threw the ball, 27 times if you count scrambles, but only 22 true passing plays in this game is a really just interesting thought, where you just didn't need to do too much. And yes, this is a really bad Purdue defense. Let's be just completely transparent about that. But with the way this offense looked, being down the pieces that you were in, 2 preseason All-Americans and then 2 starting offensive linemen, you can just kind of throw everything out the window. And for this shorthanded group with so many young guys to show up and just execute and play up to that level, for being, again, just such a young tandem of players, is a really exciting thought. But let's switch sides of the ball here, because Jedd Fisch didn't say it, but he said it, that Ryan Walters really wanted to send a message in this game. And we'll get to that right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has the live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Lars, we look at the defensive side of the ball, and I'm going to, just start this off with my pat on the back here, where I didn't get it exactly right, but I said, hey, we're going to see a big game from Zaydrius Rainey-Sale. And we saw exactly that. He gets the interception that he just dropped a couple of weeks ago against Illinois, and the way this defense showed up. And I'm sure we'll get into what we got to listen to a little bit from John Richardson toward the end of the game, with how this coaching staff was just viewing the way that this team can continue to improve on that side of the ball, is really, really exciting. But I looked at this unit as a whole, and I was pleased from front to back. You're able to get home for 3 sacks in the pass rush. Obviously, Zaydrius has the interception. The linebackers looked awesome in this game. And then the secondary, you allow 167 total passing yards. And half of that came as garbage time yards in the fourth quarter?
Yeah, I was going to say you matched the UC Davis game for 103 yards allowed in the first half. And to me, I just thought it was kind of funny that that was the exact number on the dot when I looked at you at the press box. And I was like, hey, you know what the number is? And it's somehow exactly what it was against UC Davis in week 2. But this game was one that never, from a defensive point, felt like Purdue ever had a shot to get back in the game. No matter what happened in the second half, Washington could have put you in at quarterback and me in at left tackle. And I'm giving you a shout out because I think you.
I was going to say, hold on a second here.
I'm giving you QB1 props here. I'm not. That wasn't a shop any match.
I'll take it. I was terrified of what that might look like from my own perspective.
That's fair, but I just think the fact that no matter what was going to happen on offense in the second half, you could have put up an egg in the second half, and Washington still is in control of that game because of what the defense was able to do. Ironically, as you mentioned, I did kind of have I picked the freshman, just the wrong freshman. When I had Dylan around, and I thought, I was like, hey, should I give it to Zaydrius? And I was like, nah, let me just stick with the original pick. But both of those guys are ones that, had Zaydrius not had the injury at the end of his middle way through his senior season last year, he would have been a guy from day one, would be in that Ryland position of a guy being in the mix and things like that. And that's exactly why we were so high on what this defense could do with the young core, like we were talking about in the last segment on offense. There's so many pieces to this defense that just for one reason or another haven't been able to click all together. And this felt like the game, for whatever reason, whether it was extra motivation that Ryan Walters was going against his former program, which I don't know how much I buy into that, just because of, like Ryan doesn't strike me as that kind of guy. Like, he's going to try and put the best game forward no matter who they're facing. But I'm sure, anytime you go against a school that fired you, you want to do good. And I saw some coaches after the game giving him congratulations and things like that. So yeah, it was a great game plan from him. But I think it was a case of we should have seen this also last week against Wisconsin. So if anything, you had to kind of double down this week and say, hey, look, we need to really hit home in the second half, which I was glad to see.
So I disagree with the Wisconsin thing because the defense is what really kept them in that game. And part of that is, Wisconsin's offense is, as bad as it is. But I think it's one of those things where you just look at this unit as a whole and it clicked in. I think and part of that is what happened in the Wisconsin game is we saw things click on all three levels last week. The defensive line looked really solid. Was it 7 tackles for loss last week? You had 6 this week. You had 3 sacks this week too. Devin Bryant, X-Ray Alexander, both were tremendous in this game. X-Ray Alexander, especially, he has just been on an absolute tear over the last couple of weeks. He was so impressive in this game. And then you look in the secondary as well, and you don't get the interception tonight. There were a couple of penalties where it almost just felt like a little bit too much aggression at different points in time. But, you were up by 28-35. It's okay to take a few risks at that point and see what happens. And I think that with this unit, as it continues to gel, as they'll have, 3 games remaining this season. It's just such a talented group, especially on the back end of the defense. And it was nice to see Rashawn Clark out there after he injured his knee last week against Wisconsin as well. But there's so much to like and so much to build on too, because just to bring it back to the general theme where, speaking just to touch on the Jedd Fisch thing briefly, where he was asked after the game if Ryan Walters had any extra motivation, and Jedd Fisch said, and I quote, "I'm not going to answer that question. I'll let you figure that out yourself." And I think that just kind of told me that, yeah, there was a little bit of added just emphasis on, whatever it might be this week. But I look at, Rashawn, Alex McLaughlin, Ryland Dillard-Allen, some of the guys you have coming in the 2026 classes. We know that some of them are going to play, whether it be Rajon Duncan, Jaron Jones, Gavin Day. Like there's so much talent coming in as well. And Dylan Robinson too is a name that absolutely needs to be mentioned. But it's just, there are so many building blocks for this team on both sides of the ball. And this is one of those things where, especially defensively, you start to see them today because X-Ray has eligibility remaining. And with the way he's playing, he's absolutely going to be in contention for a starting spot, no matter what the linebacker room looks like. If Jacob Manu and Buda Elukta and Zaydrius are all healthy as well, plus Devin Bryant, who's been starting all year. There is so much to like about where this team is going. And for the people out there that are saying, yeah, but it was Purdue. Yeah, it was, but you still need to show, and this is a Purdue team that, mind you, in 3 of their last 5 Big Ten games coming into this one, had put up 1 possession fights. Like they were in those games until the very end. They kind of fell apart in the fourth quarter. Shout out to Lockdown Boilermakers host Nick Arvin, who was just very keen on that when we had our crossover show last week. This is still something that you need to go out there and prove. And the fact that these building blocks continue to emerge and continue, not just emerge, but play very, very well on a week in, week out basis, with Zaydrius being the prime example of that at this point, is just such a good sign of where this unit is going.
Yeah, I mean, it's why I predicted UW to win the game but not cover. Like, there's nothing given in the Big Ten. And the fact that Jedd touched on it after the game, you rarely see 40-point games in the Big Ten. Like the last time Washington is able to score 42 or 40 plus points at home in back-to-back games, you got to go back to the Kalen days. So that tells you a lot of how hard it is to do back-to-back. That, I think, is what's key here. Now, again, not back-to-back games. Obviously, the Wisconsin game was not a 40-burger, so it is what it is there. But that's what it's all about, is making sure that you don't lose that momentum, especially at home. Like Jedd was 10-1 coming into this game at home over his time at Washington. That is significant. You can figure out the road woes as you go along. It's probably a deeper dive in the offseason for how Big Ten teams and former Pac-12 teams have been doing in that respect, because Washington isn't alone in that. Now, there's a couple, Oregon they'll probably say they're an outlier on some respect, but that's a different discussion for a different day. Being able to carry those games back to back is significant. And even if, take out the Wisconsin game or include it, it's a matter of the defense has been able to show for now 3 straight weeks after the Michigan game. And honestly, the Michigan game, they only had 24 points. So you're looking at that and saying, it's, again, not terrible. The offense should
7
score.
of those came off a short field as well, too.
And so, exactly. And so a lot of those should be good signs moving forward. But then to have it all mesh together, I think, is kind of what we haven't really seen. One steps up, one doesn't. Today was an example of everything came together. But this is why you go and bring in Ryan Walters, where you didn't think he might get fired. But if a coach like that is available, why not bring him in to be the head coach of your defense and say, you know what, until you want another head coaching job, you can just be the D coordinator and make $2 million a year you need to run my defense, because I don't want to really pay attention to that, but I also don't want to have to worry about that. And Jedd knows, like we've talked about ad nauseum, you have the resources at Washington to bring in that elite talent, like a Dylan Robinson, like a Zaydrius Rainey-Sale. You go through the list of guys that you can build for 2, 3, 4 years instead of just having to reload through the transfer portal. That's where I think this is going to be something special for Washington, where you have all of these pieces for multiple years. You can really start to build something special at Washington.
So as you were talking, something you said really stuck with me, and I think it's really worth diving into, is you said, you haven't really been able to put together a complete performance, where the offense will show up some weeks, then the defense will show up some weeks, and it's been really hard to mesh. As I think back on this season, as we are now 10 games into it, I would say that this is my second favorite win of the year for this Husky team, behind the Illinois one, because of the message that it sent, coming off such an ugly loss at Michigan. The fact that you're able to do so against a ranked team and beat them so decisively is awesome. It's tremendous. That's exactly what you're looking for. The reason that this one is second is for everything that we've just been talking about. There is so much to like moving forward, where this was always going to be a year that was, able to keep building, where this team, you had such a tremendous opportunity in front of you, and that still can't be let go, right? You can't just nix the Wisconsin loss from last week and just be like, oh yeah, that sucked, whatever. You got to move on from that. And of course the players have to do that and the coaches have to do that because they have more in front of them. But when I look at the season as a whole, this is such a great just game to, if we're sitting here in 2026 and Washington has beaten, let's just say they go to Nebraska and pull off a big win at Nebraska. You got to go there next year. You can probably, for some of these young guys that we know are going to be big pieces in that game, Zaydrius, Ryland, Champ Taulealea, whoever, Adam Mohammed, whoever it is that you want to say, you can probably ask them, hey, when did this click for you that you were doing really well tonight? Or when did that work out really well for you? It's, that really started to click for me when I did X against Purdue. I think that's going to be such a big part of this, because doing that against a conference opponent, yes, a bad one, but being able to do that in the Big Ten and have such a decisive win like this can do numbers for your confidence. And that's why this stretch of games, as we talked about the college football playoff going into last week against Wisconsin, was so important, was because you had an opportunity to do such tremendous things for your confidence if you're able to win that game. And then you just keep it rolling with this one as well, which is why I'm still so frustrated about that loss. But at the same point, as you continue to build and as you continue to move forward, there is so much to like about this roster. And I feel like this can be one of those games where for everybody on this team, things really started to click.
It really, and speaking of clicking, as you're making all those great points, you know what just hit me?
Please.
24-6 against Ohio State is your first loss. 24-7 against Michigan is your second loss. And then 13-10 last week to Wisconsin is your third loss. That's a combined 38 points, if my math is correct. I'm not the greatest math person there. You have a 36-point win tonight. If you were talking about a 2-point difference there, you absolutely are going to close that gap over the next 6 to 12 months going into 2026. So when you look at the losses this season, yeah, that loss to Wisconsin stings. But think about that. Your 2 losses are to 2 of the better teams in the Big Ten, and then Wisconsin, which is always hard to play at Camp Randall. You're basically right on the cusp of doing, that 22-23 switch that Kalen saw. You just have to add a couple more pieces, and you're really right in the mix there when it talks to, what you can do next season.
Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thanks to all everydayers out there for tuning in. We really do appreciate it. And if you like what we have to offer, please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. That's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating the channel with new content every single day. So please make sure you click that like button, click that little bell as well. So you when we go live just like this. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Monday.